Well, this video took longer than it needed to, due to a lot of factors, such as putting the project down for a bit, that bit lasting way longer than it should have, randomly losing motivation, and other projects taking priority. This video was put into development hell. To my audience who was waiting for this video, thank you for being patient, and I hope this commentary was worth the wait. Also, specifically to Metal Blade, because of how long this video took, I am open to the idea that your opinion on the subject have changed a little since the release of the video in question, and I'm open to a discussion in the comments if that is the case. So, TheMetalblade5, here's a piece of work and a half. At one point, he was a bandwagon for the commentary community and was tackled by the likes of Realm Wars, Doodle Tones, Manga Common, and a few others. Not content with just being seen as someone who can't handle a little bit of blowback on one of his videos, he decides to tackle Manga Common as well as drag an entire community into his little personal bitch fest. Needless to say, the video has problems. Also, this video talks about Persona 5, and while only one section of the video goes into major spoiler territory, I will warn you guys in advance when it happens. That said, if you want to experience Persona 5 without any spoilers, including the first palace, I would recommend shutting off the video altogether. With all that said, let's get started.
Well, I was never expecting to actually do a video on this topic. Persona 5! And a commentary to boot! Now, this will be a short video, mainly due to the fact that, well, the video I'm covering is about a minute or so long.
Then what's the point in doing a commentary on it? This is what I meant when I said this video's mere existence bothered me. Lore videos are incredibly short, with their main series of Lore in a Minute, as the title says, being only a minute long. So I find that making an entire commentary hate on such a short video to be incredibly pointless. I'm not saying that the video can't be criticized because it's a minute long, but I feel that making a video on it is unnecessary, and you could have just left a comment on the video, as not only would it likely be pretty short considering what your counter-arguments in this video are, but it would also take much less time to actually do.
Metal, why are you making a big deal about this? The original video being short shouldn't matter in the long run. The deciding factor for making a commentary should be whether the video was flawed or not. As for the point about leaving a comment, while I could see this being a perfect counter-argument to, say, a one-shot, where really there's only one point being made about one small section of the video, manga is tackling the entire video, and even using clips to provide his points later in this commentary. The latter of which would be very hard to convey using just words. Not to mention, if manga did comment on the video, there's the risk of it getting flagged, drowned in hate, deleted by the channel, or YouTube just glitching out and it vanishing forever.
Plus, one of the many reasons why I dislike the commentary community is that a lot of the things they do come off as being desperate for attention. And this is an example of that because, not gonna lie, when I first saw this, I immediately said, how desperate can you get? And I know that's a very mean thing to say, but still, it gives me the impression that you really needed to find something to complain about.
Someone's desperate for approval.
Personally, I would just ignore videos like this unless I was doing it within a collection of other videos as part of a series, like with 1 Minute Melee and DBX, because individually, they aren't something that actively bother me or that I strongly disagree with.
Alright, now I'm confused. How is this video desperate? Because it's a short commentary on a short video? Look, instead of repeating the point that I just made earlier, I'll say this. An actual sign of desperation would be making this commentary on Lore's video the day after it came out, while knowing little to nothing about the product, having no interest in Persona 5, and wanting to ride off the first week hype train for the views. This just looks like manga wanted to talk about Persona 5 and conveniently found material talking about the game in the same month the game was out.
Meet Lore, a channel that does minute-long videos on cartoons, video games, and other things when I realize, and basically gives like a summarized version of the lore of the games or whatever they're covering. In addition, they get other people to voice the videos. So I guess this is more appropriate to be covering two channels at once, since this one was voiced by Octopimp, who appears to be an anime channel? I don't know. Okay, when I say this, I am asking a legitimate question here. Do you know how lore videos actually work? Because all Octopimp did was voice in the video, yet he's getting equal blame for it. When making a Lore in a Minute video, the lore team writes out a script summarizing the lore of the specific installment or series that they are covering, and then they get another YouTuber, or in some cases a voice actor, who typically has something related to the topic. For example, when they did the lore video on Mega Man X, they got Eagle Raptor to do the voiceover. But in most cases, they end up either using Octopimp or Dodger. It's very similar to Digino Gaming, where all the facts in their videos have already been posted on the website, but they collect a bunch of them related to a specific topic, and generally get a YouTuber who has some sort of relation to that topic. Whoever does the voiceover has no impact on the script or information that is presented in the video. Therefore, Octopimp is in no way responsible for the errors present in Lore's video. Additionally, since you decided to specifically mention Octopimp's channel, in which you question if he's an anime channel or not, if you were to scroll through his videos, you'll see that none of them are in any way related to the Persona series, which means that it's entirely possible that he doesn't play or even know much about Persona. So as such, he would have been unable to notice the mistakes in Lore's script and speak up about it. You could argue that they should have gotten someone who knows stuff about the game to do the voice, so that they could point out errors, but you don't, so I'm still going to fault you for that. So let me tell everyone the real story behind Lore's video. Lore wrote a script of the summarized plot setup of Persona 5 with some mistakes in there, and then they got Octopimp to do the voiceover because he's voiced in a lot of other Lore videos in the past, and because getting an anime channel to talk about Persona isn't too far of a stretch, seeing as how the series has a very anime style, with all the main characters being high school students, and a talking cat, but mostly high school students, and because Octopimp knows little or nothing about the game, he was unaware of the mistakes when reading out the script for the video. By crediting Octopimp in the title of this commentary, you have completely manipulated this scenario to make it appear like Octopimp is responsible for the problems with the video, when he isn't. He only did the voice. And it's not even like you try to prove that he had some involvement in the video outside of voice work. You're just all like, well, since they get billed a voice, I guess it's more appropriate for this to be a commentary on 2 channels!
All of this bitching and moaning over one line. All of which is to regurgitate information manga already said, along with a massive assumption that manga was partially blaming the video's quality on Octopimp. But if you were to perk an ear up, you might have noticed that from his line delivery, manga was more weirded out from the random casting choice rather than blaming anyone. Not to mention, Lore credited Octopimp for his voiceover in the video, so why can't manga bring it up? Also,
He doesn't play or even know much about Persona.
how do you know this? Because he hasn't made a video talking about Persona? From his channel, it looks like Octopimp is a casual gamer and really isn't interested in talking about video games as much as playing them. Not to mention, this only validates manga being weirded out with the odd casting choice.
Plus, I find this whole blaming Octopimp thing to be super hypocritical because Doodle Tones made a response to some sort of live stream you did with some other people, which I'm not trying to butt in on because it's none of my business.
This is none of my business. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll be taking a random comment talking about this subject, effectively making it my business. Yeah, 10 out of 10 logic, GG, WP, time to KMS, you DUMBASS. And what is this all for? Some nebulous hypocrisy argument built on broken foundation? What? You don't see it? Well, there's the apples to oranges comparison, as a scripted video is being compared to a live stream where everyone's talking off the top of their heads. The fact that this drama is being brought up for a point that manga never even made in the video. Oh, and side note, manga apologized for the potential damage his live stream did in the comment that you're showing. This point is sitting right in front of you. How are you missing this?
Our reality, there exists a realm known as the Palace. Less than 10 seconds. I'd say that'd be a record, but on this channel, that's So essentially, this calls into question a few things, since no, the other reality isn't called the Palace, it's called the Metaverse. While yes, the players do go to palaces, they're manifestations of the Metaverse created by strong desires by people. Now, while to those who haven't played Persona 5, this may sound like a nitpick, but considering that the Metaverse is the driving factor of the plot, and pretty much hammered into the player as you go through the game, this comes off as a really bad sign. While yes, the other world in Persona 5 is called the Metaverse and not the Palace, in the grand scheme of things, this is just a small and understandable name slip-up, because palaces are not only manifestations within the Metaverse, but they're also the only areas within the Metaverse that you actually explore during gameplay.
This doesn't disprove manga's point, though. The Metaverse appears to be an alternate universe that the characters enter into, with the palaces being the major locations within the Metaverse where stuff happens.
Even Mementos, because Morgana stresses that Mementos is just the palace of the general public of Tokyo. So outright saying that the other world is called a palace isn't such a massive error because it isn't that far off from the truth. I'm not excusing them for making the mistake, but I can understand how they ended up doing that. Meaning that this further plays towards how I find this commentary to be so unnecessary, seeing as how this mistake isn't anything major.
But it's still an error, though. Why is manga not allowed to bring this up? The general idea with commentaries is to bring up issues with the video. This was an issue with the video. It detracted from manga's viewing experience with the video. That and the Metaverse is part of Persona 5's lore, so it only makes sense to bring it up since it's part of the backstory and lore.
Hell, I didn't find out that the other world was called the Metaverse until around the point where you explore Mementos for the first time, which, at least for me, was around 10 hours into the game. And even then, sometimes when the characters are referring to the Metaverse, they call it names such as that other world or the cognitive world, rather than the Metaverse.
Yet manga never said it was early on, he said it was throughout the game. This goes into a flawed point about Atlus's copyright bullshittery, but I'll get to that later.
So I'm left with a few thoughts in my head. One, that no one bothered to look this over to make sure, hey, we should probably get our facts straight. Two, that this video was made by people who not only know the bare bones of the game and didn't bother to look up the basic fact of said game. Or three, that these people are only trying to capitalize on the game's popularity and threw this together as quick as they could.
Oh great, it's the whole, let's just assume that people do things for the worst reasons with absolutely no proof whatsoever to make them look as bad as possible, which the commentary community loves doing. Or as it's more commonly referred to as, character assassination. I'm sorry for getting so angry about this, but I absolutely cannot stand it when people do this shit, since all they do is take a good-natured person and attempt to damage their nice image for no good reason. In this case, Manga Comment makes it look like Lore only cares about money and views by accusing them of rushing out the video to capitalize on Persona 5's popularity. And while he brings up other potential reasons, which is more than what most people do, that's still the one he places the greatest emphasis on, which gives the impression that he's saying that one is the most likely possibility. If you just said that you felt they rushed it, then I would have no issue with that because I can understand how you could come to that conclusion. But for no reason, you decide to add on to capitalize on the game's popularity. In which, do you have any proof that that's why they did it? No!
While I do agree that the last idea the manga came to was a bit harsh for such a small mistake, what you took from it was that Lore makes these videos for money. Which isn't too outlandish since a lot of people run their channels like businesses anyway and would take advantage of a game's popularity regardless of rushing the video or not. Also, does he have proof? Dude, Lore videos on modern games come out during the week of the subject's release date. It's usually during that time that people are searching out for the information about the game, and subsequently videos talking about it. Hell, cashing out on the game's popularity is the least offensive thing that could be said about it, seeing as manga claimed that they didn't even bother to look up the basic facts about the game. Kamen Rider, bro. The majority of information said here is correct, as seen from you skipping a few times in the video. To say they didn't look up any information is kinda sorta exaggerating the mistake.
And if you were to look up other Lore videos on then newly released and upcoming games, then you'll find that they are much more accurate, meaning that the mistakes in the Persona 5 video are far more likely to just be legitimate mistakes that any person can make, rather than being a result of rushing it out to capitalize on the game's popularity. Plus, with the whole capitalizing on Persona 5's popularity, if I really wanted to, I could say the exact same thing about this commentary, seeing as how unnecessary it is to me, and because of how excited you were to find an excuse to talk about Persona 5.
That doesn't undo the fact that this is still a mistake, and most likely that it was done while trying to meet the deadline, which was Persona 5's international release. This also undermines the fact that each Lore video was written by a different person, so this mostly good track record means nothing in the grand scheme of things.
I covered my tale if this was a joke. Well, it certainly didn't come off like that, especially since it was the first point in the entire video and there was no punchline. You can say that I cut them off, but having watched this entire video, the comedy here comes from the visuals and the slight vocal joke near the end that could be barely considered a joke at all.
What? How was that in any way a joke? It was clearly a serious statement, and you only spend this section proving how it wasn't a joke, which makes it entirely pointless. I mean, I know that the commentary community will believe that anything is a joke, but that's only in commentaries themselves. On any video that isn't titled as a commentary, they take everything people say way too seriously.
And the majority of people casually watching will go to the defense for the video saying, "It's just a joke, bruh," which will require that the presenter either account for this or disprove that it's a joke altogether. Not helping is that Lore videos have a subtle bit of humor within their videos, with that bit at the end, so it only makes sense to clear up whether something was a joke or not. Also, hindsight seems to be on the Griffin's side as well, seeing as a little while after tackling this video, manga tackled Silohawk, and got the response of "it was satire," or "it's just a joke." Basically, an excuse to tell manga to stop criticizing the video. Yeah, this is the part of the video where major spoilers happen. Skip to this part of the video to avoid spoilers. Alright, let's continue.
Initially, the palace encompassed humanity's hopes and dreams, but soon the ambitions of adult authority figures corrupted both the palace and the real world. Except, and feel free to say I'm splitting hairs here, how did Futaba's palace do that? Palaces in Persona 5 are conditions of an individual with strong desires, and it's stated that pretty much anyone who has a desire strong enough can create a palace in the metaverse. Considering that one of the palaces you go to in the game is a gat of Futaba's, a 15-year-old girl, it's not just adults.
No, Lore never said that only adults could have palaces. They said that adults were the cause behind the corruption of the metaverse, and in Futaba's case, that still applies. This is because at this part, you completely fail to look at the reason why why Futaba's palace exists in the first place, which is a pretty big thing to overlook, seeing as how the treasures that the Phantom Thieves steal take the form of whatever caused that individual's desires to become destroyed in the first place. Especially in the case of Futaba's palace, because the story behind it is plastered all over the place. Futaba's palace exists because her mother, Wakaba, committed suicide due to a psychotic breakdown in which a group of men in black suits, who are the ones who caused the psychotic breakdown in the first place, forged a suicide note to pin the blame on Futaba by making it look like Wakaba killed herself because Futaba was being a pain in the ass. As a result, not only did Futaba blame herself for her mother's death, but her relatives also verbally abused her by saying things such as, "You killed her," and calling her a murderer. Because of this, Futaba ends up wishing that she was dead, which manifests into her palace as it takes the form of a pyramid because she views Sojiro's house as her tomb. The reason why Futaba's palace exists is because of the actions of those men in black and her abusive relatives, who are all adults. Even Futaba alludes to this herself when confronting the cognitive version of her mother. Therefore, lore isn't wrong on this point, especially since they also specifically mention adults impacting the real world, as the actions of the men in black and Futaba's relatives occurred within the real world, which had ramifications on the metaverse. Considering how this commentary is supposed to be pointing out plot details that lore skipped over, with manga comment effectively saying the truth about the plot, this is also hypocritical because you completely looked over important plot details as well. Again, irony. But there is one other major issue I have with bringing up Futaba's palace as a counter-argument.
Okay, this is one of the weirder parts of the video, as neither person in this section was wrong. How is that even possible? Well, the part that's not right was lore. Specifically how they framed this information in this section. They said that the palaces were corrupted by adult authority figures, implying the palaces are locations and that adults took them over, not a product made by an individual with strong desires. So manga arguing that Futaba made her palace isn't necessarily wrong. Metal's point about Futaba was also correct, but the original piece of info that lore presented, what Metal was defending after all, was not well conveyed.
Being that when Persona 5 was released, Atlus had a very strict stance on people posting spoilers of the game, in which people would face copyright strikes if they did. One of these spoilers was that nobody was allowed to post anything about the game after the 11th of July. And when do you first go to Futaba's palace? The 25th of July. While later on Atlus softened their stance on this, in which they pushed back the cutoff date to the 19th of November, Lore's video was uploaded the very next day after Persona 5's international release. So even if they did know about Futaba having a palace, they couldn't say it or hint at it, otherwise they could have had their video taken down.
There is one ginormous problem here. Reading what you put on screen, it appears that Atlus's rules would only take down walkthroughs, live streams, and let's plays of Persona 5. Almost everything mentioned here talks about showcasing sections of the game, not talking about Persona 5, just recorded gameplay that people put online. Since lore videos consist of original animation, what they're doing is 100% void of Atlus's copyright bullshittery. Yeah, I'm speaking in hypotheticals, but from what you're showing, it is possible to upload a video around Persona 5's release date, spoiling the game like crazy with nothing but a black screen, and nothing would happen.
You're a new student at Tokyo's Shujin Academy, when a classmate is abused by the school gym teacher. Now, this is the point on presentation rather than the actual lore here. I immediately knew that this was a huge mess up. For one, this scene is actually from a different point in the game. The point in which the protagonist confronted a man who was harassing a woman in the streets. This scene has nothing to do with what's being said here at the time. And I wouldn't make so much of a big deal about this, except one of the first scenes of this entire video had the gym teacher Kamoshida in it. Why put that scene here? Because that has nothing to do with what you're saying. Heck, you could just put Kamoshida right there. We already know you know about it.
Alright, that's it. It's time for a change. This part is the other reason why I find manga comment pinning the blame on Octopimp to be super hypocritical. This part of the video, where they're referring to Kamoshida's abuses but show the scene in which Masayoshi Shido is sexually harassing a woman in the street, the error in this part of the video is solely to do with the animation, which you admit yourself, and even say that there's nothing wrong with what's being said. This also links back to me getting the impression that you don't know how lore videos work, because as well as getting a YouTuber to voice in the videos, they also get an animator to do, well, the animations. In the case of the Persona 5 video, the animations were done by Hagen Tunes, if I'm pronouncing that right. Now, I'm not saying that the animator is to blame either, because I don't know how lore videos are handled from the animation side of things, so it's possible that lore just tells them what to animate, and they do as instructed. But seeing as how manga comment stance on this video is pretty much, if they had anything to do with the video, however minor, they should be credited with being responsible, why is the animator getting a free pass?
Alright, ignoring that point about Octopimp for a moment, it's still lore's job to handle the visuals to show what should and shouldn't be on screen, as this appears to be bad direction and less that the animator made a mistake. It's akin to having a good voice actor, but bad voice direction. Blaming the animator would only make sense if the characters were animated poorly. But seeing as manga, a guy who has critiqued someone's art assets before, never brought up how the video looked, it makes sense to put the responsibility back onto lore for bad direction. Might I remind you, all of this is to hammer in a counter-argument for a point that manga never actually made.
But that's not all. There is actually a reason why Law doesn't show Kamoshida at this part. Going back to Atlus's initially strict stance on spoilers about Persona 5, they also went over how people should discuss the game with others without spoiling it, in which they gave a specific good and bad example. In the bad example, which shows how people shouldn't spoil the game for others, it says, players immediately run into trouble with the pervy teacher Spoiler, whose actions go so far as to cause spoiler. While Kamoshida, or more specifically his shadow, appears in the video, they never refer to him by name or even say who he is or what he does. He's just there. So it falls in line with the guidelines set by Atlus, in which you can't call Kamoshida by name or say what exactly he does.
So, showing the wrong scene makes far more sense than spoiling something that happens early on in the game. What? So wait, lore showing the first boss, which is the same guy mind you, is fair, but simply showing his human form would be going too far. How? Hell, you can put what's-his-face in both scenes without naming him and it would still fall under Atlus's guidelines, which might I remind you is for gameplay only. The rest of the video has nothing to talk about since everything mentioned afterwards requires that you buy the idea that Atlus's BS copyright rule could affect what is technically fan animation, so final thoughts. I would just recap the video, but I have a more interesting point to make. So throughout the video, there's all this mention of the commentary community.
Plus, one of the many reasons why I dislike the commentary community is that a lot of the things they do come off as being desperate for attention. Let's just assume that people do things for the worst reasons with absolutely no proof whatsoever to make them look as bad as possible, which the commentary community loves doing. Or as it's more commonly referred to as, character assassination. I mean, I know that the commentary community will believe that anything is a joke, but that's only in commentaries themselves. On any video that isn't titled as a commentary, they take everything people say way too seriously.
Now I could break out the excuse that manga gave, that being that he really doesn't identify with the same niche as guys like Ryan, Boon Slayer, Doodletones, etc. But I feel that wouldn't work, since people in the CC, what's left of it anyhow, are using OCs and have a similar video format to Kamen Rider over here, so it's not unfounded to draw a connection. Where I object is the need to put everyone, regardless of where they stand, into the same camp. A community does not consist of just one person, so I find it very questionable to bring up the entire CC throughout the video. Manga Kamen only represents one person, himself. Honestly, it seems like you only responded to this video because you're still salty about that little spat you had with Realm Wars and the backlash that followed afterwards. All of which has long since passed by the time you made this video. And yes, I can tell. Seeing as all 3 points sound like you're regurgitating your issues with Realm Wars' commentary on you, as well as everyone else that participated in that bandwagon. The only thing I can recommend at this point is to put your personal issues with the commentary community off to the side and stick to the facts, as the chunk of the video that I skipped around the end of your video was just that. Or you can continue to be as ass-hurt as possible. That's also an option. Not a good one, mind you. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, I'm open to discussion in the comments, and I'm signing out.